people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fucking fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap, our continued coverage of all, if not most of, this past weekend's action in the women's bantamweight division, where two unbeaten fighters, Brie Howling of Canada and Naomi Cardenas of Mexico, squared off on the undercard of the most valuable promotions show, and Brie, unfortunately, suffered her first professional loss. I didn't pick a pony in this race. In this show, I knew a lot more about Brie Howling going in, as I have watched her development from one fight to the next, whereas Naomi was new to me. But upon viewing the footage of her in action, I already knew she's going to be a handful for Brie, that Brie has never seen somebody like this in her 8 professional bouts. And having no prior amateur experience as a pugilist, this could be more than she could deal with. Neither fighter at 8-0 was so bankable that I could go with one over the other, but I got the sense this is going to be a hard fight for Brie, and that's what it proved to be. Now, it's important to note that Brie landed this slot on this show on short notice. It's not like she had a full camp to be here, and it's definitely not like she had a full camp for Naomi. She didn't. And while the same is true in reverse, that affects Brie more than it affects Naomi, because Naomi is a pressure fighter.
So what?
A pressure fighter is gonna fight the same fight from one fight to the next. There's really not that much emphasis on the opponent and preparing for the opponent, but for a boxer-puncher like Brie, it is a little bit more important to know who you're fighting and how they fight. She didn't have that luxury.
You making excuses for Brie?
No, I'm just wrapping my mind around what I saw and explaining it. That for the boxer-puncher, there is a bit more emphasis on strategy, how you're going to fight the fight, and to do that, you need to know who you're fighting. Well, Brie didn't actually have a full camp for Naomi.
Didn't know a whole lot about her, and Brie herself is not so experienced a fighter that she would have faced someone as persistent and aggressive as Naomi before. So she was kind of caught off guard and at times flustered by the come-forward aggression of Naomi Cardenas.
Now, even with that, she handled herself well, trying to move, trying to create distance, trying to walk Naomi into punches. Many times she did, but Naomi showed a good chin, good punch resistance, good resolve, and a great work rate. That's what won her the fight.
She set a feverish pace for the fight from the opening bell, shot out of her corner like a bat out of hell, and was all over Brie Howling in the early goings of the fight. It was just so much more than Brie Howling was used to.
As Naomi Cardenas crashed the pocket, let go of punches in bunches, Brie Howling tucked behind the guard, trying desperately not to get hit and to get out a punch or two.
She did.
But Naomi was able to take the power, take the punches, and she was very persistent throughout. Very aggressive.
The optics didn't do Brie any favors, that even in moments where she's effectively creating enough space to get hard punches out and hard counters, Naomi's still the one backing her up, more often than not. Naomi is still crowding her, so in the eyes of the judges, Naomi is the ring general, and Brie is just weathering the storm.
She was basically forced to fight the fight the way that Naomi wanted her to fight the fight, and with a bit more preparation, you never really know.
What could have been different?
With preparation, there likely would have been a bit more emphasis on movement, not just beating those feet, but angling off as well. Get Naomi to tire out by slipping, rolling,
by making her miss punches. Don't even engage her.
So if you're already familiar with the opponent and you know what they're going to do, you know they're going to come right at you. You can cause them to tire that much faster by making them miss, because you burn twice as much energy missing a punch as if you actually hit something.
If they would have had a little bit more insight on Naomi,
there might have been more emphasis on making her miss to tire her out, going to her body.
That'll take the air out of her tires too.
And what punches are you going to use? What punches specifically are you going to use against the fighter who's coming in at a slight crouch, bending at the waist and knees, crashing the pocket? The uppercut would have been a nice way to go. But of course, that kind of preparation would have required insights on Naomi that they didn't have. Whereas Naomi, like I said, she's a pressure fighter. Brie Howling is somebody else. She's gonna fight the same fight.
She's gonna fight the exact same way, so there's not as much emphasis on preparation. She's gonna do the same thing.
She fought a good fight yesterday, and being honest, I see a world champion in Naomi. I do. I see a fighter who down the line can win a belt or some belts. But I think the same thing about Brie.
Just had a tough night at the office yesterday. It's hardly the end of the world.
She can come back from it, but for a fighter with no prior amateur experience, only 8 fights into their professional boxing career, a pressure fighter, a physical fighter, a very persistent one.
They can outwork you. That's what happened yesterday. Brie Howling got outworked.
Congratulations to Naomi.
Over to Australia, where Jai Opetaia once again successfully defended his Ring Magazine and IBF titles against Squeo.
Woefully overmatched fighter and undersized for the cruiserweight division. If you squint, he sort of looked like Canelo Alvarez out there.
If Canelo were about 50 pounds heavier and obese.
This was just a layup for Jai Opetaia. This was just a stay busy fight, and you can hardly blame him for it when Zurdo Ramirez is otherwise preoccupied right now with his mandatory challenger, Badu Jack.
Upon being reinstated as WBC champion, he was ordered to fight Noel Mikhailian, and now he's under orders to give him a rematch. The other champions were not available to Jai Opetaia at the time that this fight was made, but he has to fight. He has to stay busy.
So he ended up with this guy. And at the start of the fight, nothing really happens. Jai's not ready to commit to anything, and neither was Squeo.
Jai's moving around, still filling a guy out, still getting his range down. He was noticeably shorter than most of the guys that Jai has fought before. I feel like Jai was adjusting to that, not rushing his work because he knows he doesn't have to.
He was very calm throughout, and I'd say it was at around round 3 where he started putting the screws to this guy and getting at him, going after him, landing many backhands from out of the southpaw stance.
Creating clear separation, showing the difference between them. After about 2 to 3 rounds, Jai Opetaia was done playing with his food and he was ready to go home.
Starts busting this guy up at around round 3, round 4. It was in round 5 where he connected with what looked like a hard right hook, a hard right hand that may have broken Squeo's jaw. Squeo,
he had sort of a delayed reaction after the punch landed. The punch connects, you could see that it hurt him. 1 or 2 seconds later, Squeo decides to take a knee.
Fight gets waved off. There was no sense in continuing for Squeo. Once Jai decided he wanted to end it, that's what he did, putting a bit of his boxing on display, which you don't often get to see since Jai does have a penchant for ending his fights early.
Jai's got a mean streak. He's a devastating puncher. And so the hope is now that because Jai just fought and Zurdo Ramirez, this division's unified champion, is about to, that because they're practically on the same schedule, the next fight for them will be a fight with each other.
Now, Ring Magazine, they posted this image in the hopes of promoting a potential Opetaia versus Ramirez fight. But myself, I'm not that optimistic it's going to happen, because the last few weeks and the last few months, Zurdo Ramirez's name has been attached to 1 or 2 potential fights that do not include Jai Opetaia. He's been mentioned as a potential opponent for David Benavidez in the not-so-distant future, and Oscar De La Hoya, his promoter, mentioned a potential Jake Paul fight.
Come on, Jake's not gonna fight this guy.
I'm not saying that he is, but the fact that Oscar De La Hoya is talking more about a Benavidez fight and more about a Jake Paul fight than he's talking about an Opetaia fight, that tells you where Oscar's head is at, that Opetaia fight, that is not his first choice for his fighter or even his second choice. So, if he can find something else for him to do, he might. It's unfortunate for Jai, because I think Jai Opetaia has everything it takes to become the cruiserweight division's next undisputed champion, but to do that, he's got to get these guys in the ring, and that's what he's been struggling with. Badu Jack, the WBC champion, has to fight Noel Mikhailian again. Zurdo is fighting Dorticos, and then after that, we don't know what he's going to do.
My gut tells me that they would rather go into a fight with David Benavidez than go into a fight with Jai, because the fight with David would not require them to travel, would not require them to go to Saudi Arabia and roll the dice. They could do it here in America. Golden Boy could promote it. My gut tells me that that fight is closer to being made than people realize. David Benavidez won his last fight. All Zerto has to do is win his, and then after that, they're free to make it. That Golden Boy would rather that Zerto fight David Benavidez because he would be a fighter that's moving up in weight as opposed to fighting another bona fide cruiser. You can do the fight with David right here in America, on the West Coast, or in Vegas. Remember that Oscar's been talking about a Golden Boy Promotions and PBC alliance that would see them doing more fights together, more business with each other. And we talked about that here on the channel 1 or 2 days ago. This is so obviously a fight they could make amongst themselves that wouldn't require any involvement from Turkey El Al Sheikh, Sela, or Saudi Arabia. And underneath it all, I think that's how Oscar wants it. I think that's how Oscar likes it. He doesn't want to sacrifice any of his fighters to Turkey's shows. And you see what just happened to Ryan Garcia in the Times Square show. You think Oscar wants more of that? He doesn't have the bodies to spare. All of his guys got swept. Ryan got beat, Jose, Arnold. You think he wants more of that? Zerto Ramirez is one of the few, very few champions that are fighting under the Golden Boy Promotions banner that I don't think Oscar wants to sacrifice him to one of Turkey's shows. And so Jai Opetaia's quest to become undisputed champion at this weight has hit a proverbial roadblock. It's hit a snag. I'd love to be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. Congratulations to Jai Opetaia for successfully defending his titles, but it's not looking good for the near future. Not for the unification, undisputed effort. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, you may have heard this weekend that Skysports will not renew the Boxer deal. As widely expected, Skysports will not be renewing their 4-year exclusive contract with Ben Shalom's Boxer, which expires at the end of this month. Sky's strategy moving forward will see them pick up individual fights from a range of promoters, not just Boxer. They're not making a commitment to them. Reacting to this news this past weekend, Eddie Hearn chimed in, echoing a familiar sentiment I've said more than once here on the channel, that in many ways, Ben was always doomed to fail because he could never hope to compete with both Matchroom and Queensberry with what little he had.
About the whole situation, and what do you know about this situation?
What do I know about it? Probably what you know, what you've read, and probably a little bit more, I guess, from things people say. It's not my business. I think, and I know people might think this is arrogant, which is probably standard, but it was always going to be very difficult, no, I would say impossible, to replicate what Matchroom and Skysports did together. It was one of the most successful organisation broadcaster relationships there's ever been, certainly in the sport of boxing. The schedule, the building of stars, the promotion, the pay-per-view, everything was, you know, definitely the most successful period in Sky Sports boxing history, and maybe in the broadcast history with a rights holder. I don't necessarily think Ben has done a bad job, if I'm honest. You know, I've got to know him. You know, we have our ups and downs, but it's not easy. It's not easy. You know, you've got to compete against some relentless individuals who will plot your downfall, will sometimes work against you, won't help you out. Then maybe you get helped out, you get on a run, maybe you make some mistakes, maybe you treat people incorrectly and things go against you. I don't know, but for me, I don't think Sky Sports can really be in the game after what we had together, because they'll never get anything close to it again. It was incredible, and I'm not saying this I'm not saying Eddie Hearn done that, Matchroom did that. I'm saying we all did that. Matchroom, me, Sky Sports, it was the most golden period. And I don't agree with, when I took the exclusive contract with Sky Sports, it was the first time they did it exclusively with one promoter. And people weren't sure about that, and it's the only way to go. I don't believe in working with loads of different promoters, and you have to have a plan. You have to have a rights deal with a promoter and an organisation and a stable of fighters to grow them.
It was a hot take from Eddie Hearn that Sky simply cannot compete. They can't be in the game, not with the current situation that Matchroom is exclusive to DAZN, so is Queensberry. Any big fight in the British boxing scene likely involves their fighters. How is Sky supposed to keep up with that? With what?
They tried it with Boxer, but Boxer at its very best has a fledgling stable that they are still developing. Neither Carolyn Dubois or Lauren Price is yet the answer to Katie Taylor, because they don't draw how Katie draws.
And that's when it comes to the women. When it comes to the men, forget about it when it comes to the men. Boxer has nothing to compete with Connor Benn.
The whole Matchroom stable, are you joking?
I mean, we could spend the rest of this video talking about how much deeper Matchroom's stable is, domestically and internationally, than Boxer's, and it's the same with Queensberry. Queensberry not only has the Boxers, they've got the heavyweight division.
That's the granddaddy of them all.
There's no way Sky was ever going to be able to keep up with both Matchroom and Queensberry with just Boxer, and that's why I've maintained that perhaps Ben was always doomed to fail. It doesn't all come down to whether or not he did a good job or a bad one. He just never had the ingredients to begin with.
So what they want to do now is bid on individual shows, but that's still not a fail-safe, because if Matchroom and Queensberry jointly are committed to the DAZN platform...
Whose fights are you gonna bid on? Boxers? You just cut them loose. And the rumor is that Boxer may wash up on the shores of TNT, who are still looking for boxing content after Queensberry left them high and dry. That's where Ben and his fighters might go, but as far as Sky and their future in the sport of boxing, they're telling themselves that we're only gonna bid on the biggest of the big fights.
And whose fights are those?
You'd have to be talking about Matchroom or Queensberry Promotions shows, and maybe you could put a bid in for some of the cards that they're doing.
The bigger ones.
Doesn't guarantee that they would get the rights to those fights, and even if they did, their presence in the sport would not be as felt as it was when Matchroom was their promotional partner.
This looks more like a nasty divorce and a custody battle to where the children only see one of the parents every other weekend. It's that kind of a situation. It's not what it was.
And for that, why even try to stay in the sport at all? So this is what Eddie means when they can't compete and there's no place for them in the current landscape. Not right now.
It sucks to suck.
The only solution is to either bow out or go balls deep in with Boxer for another 4 years to further allow them to develop their stable in the hopes that you can replicate what you had with Matchroom.
Which is not likely.
See what direction they're going in. Not being a Brit myself, I'm told by the Brits that they're buying the rights to other sports.
That is how they hope to fill the void.
I believe it's with the rights to the Premier League, which on average brings a lot more viewers in than a boxing match.
The bottom line is they tried it with Boxer, but Boxer is no substitute for Matchroom.